This is part 3. Okay? Today is it. Okay? This is only a 3-part class. After today, there will be, well, I'm going to say there's nothing else that needs to be said about the prophet Isaiah, but that's not really true. Okay? The only people who will be saying anything more about the prophet Isaiah is people who know what they're talking about. So, we're finishing up what I can do. All right, so make sure everything's working. Click. Come on. There we go. All right. Now, as we are starting out, I want us to remember something very, very important. We talked about this in the first class, but I want you to remember, okay, the main role of a prophet, and that includes Isaiah, was not to predict the future. Okay? It was to speak the word of God to the people, especially the king and religious leaders. Okay? This is important. So it wasn't so much, looking at the future as much as looking at the here and now. Okay, there were some elements of, let's say, predicting, but more in the sense of, come on, folks, you better get your act together or bad things are going to be happening. But usually bad things are happening now, and you don't want to keep making God unhappy. Okay, so sometimes these messages, these commentaries would be a warning or a threat. Sometimes they would be a judgment or a condemnation, but sometimes they were more positive than that. Sometimes they were a reassurance or a hopeful vision. In every case, it was with the understanding God is the Almighty. That's always, especially where Isaiah was coming from. That vision of being, so overwhelmed by the majesty and the glory of God. And Isaiah's vision, anything else that tried to compete with God, didn't stand a chance. Okay? God is not to be trifled with or ignored. His power and majesty can bring a day of the Lord. Sorry, I should have outlined that. And we have several examples of that. Not so much doom and gloom. We hear the day of the Lord and we think, oh boy, here it comes. And yet much of Isaiah speaks of a day of the Lord when God truly makes things the way that He really wants them to be. It will be beyond what we can imagine. It will be absolutely amazing. Okay? But I want to get this across because today I think maybe in some ways we're going to have to unlearn some things. And I hope it's not going to be too painful for some of you. I am not up here as a heretic, or I am not up here to try and turn you into heretics. Some might think that way already, but if they're thinking about me, that's their problem. Okay, I want to start out then with the things that we're going to be talking about today. I want to do just a quick review or view of 2 of our liturgical seasons. Okay, first of all, the season of Advent. Okay, this is just a general, what a season of Advent might look like. Okay, week 3. Well, it works at home when I do that. Okay. Week 3, it's not pink, it's rose. Don't you forget it. Priests don't wear pink. Okay. But the season of Advent, and you see that the Sundays are broken down in thirds there. Reason for that is because this has to do with the Mass readings during the season of Advent. And on the Sundays, depending upon the year, we're on a 3-year cycle of readings. Year A, Year B, or Year C. This year, and that holds true for Advent as well, this year we are in the last part of Year A. Okay? So starting with the first Sunday of Advent in December this year, we will be going to the Year B Sunday Gospel reading. Okay? This is just very general because this might not look like this. Advent can have any number of these days missing from it. What determines that? Advent. Stay with Advent, folks.
So many days after Pentecost?
No.
Feast days?
It depends on the day of the week that Christmas is. Okay? Advent, for the season of Advent, you will always have 4 Sundays. But the rest of the number of the days, it's not a fixed number. And that's what will be different from the season of Lent. Because as we know, the season of Lent, it always starts on Ash Wednesday. And Easter Sunday, always falls on a Sunday. Yay! Okay? Okay, all right. She can explain it to you back home. Okay. All right. So I want to take a look at where we find Isaiah. How often is Isaiah used as the first reading during the season of Advent? Okay? And so when the first reading is taken from 1st Isaiah, that many times. So on the Sundays, all 4 of the Sundays in Year A have a reading from Isaiah, plus all the weekdays early on, and then down here, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Okay, that's just 1st Isaiah. You add in 2nd Isaiah, when the first reading is a reading from 2nd Isaiah, and you can see quite a bit more. And 3rd Isaiah, not so much. Okay? And the reason for that, of course, can anybody think of why that might be, that we don't have that much in Advent from 3rd Isaiah? What did we say 3rd Isaiah had to do with? The restoration, okay, coming back after the exile, right? And so in 3rd Isaiah, we don't see that much looking forward, okay, anticipating. 3rd Isaiah is more restructuring. It's more, okay, let's get our act together and keep it together. Okay, but Advent being a season of anticipation, the coming of the Lord. 1st and 2nd Isaiah, we find a lot more passages that take on that spirit. Okay. So, and the readings, I know you can't read these, and that's fine, but you're going to be surprised how familiar you are with so many of these readings. There's so many of them that are so beautiful. First Monday, that's one of my all-time favorites. But everything from, God will provide abundantly, the blind will see, the desert will bloom, to, as we talked about first class, he will raise you up on eagle's wings. I am the Lord, there is no other. And of course, to the very popular, very familiar, the virgin shall conceive and bear a child, and they shall name him Emmanuel. Okay, that's in general. This year, excuse me, I take that back. These blue days in here, these 17th through the 24th of December. Now, you don't absolutely need to know this in the sense of, oh my gosh, if I can't keep this straight, I'm just telling you what the church has laid out for us. Okay, so it's already taken care of. This is just an explanation. But the last week before Christmas, whenever the 17th hits, then we stop counting in terms of Wednesday of the second week, okay, or Tuesday of the third week of Advent, okay. We go into specific readings, the 17th through the 24th. And so again, whenever Christmas is, that will determine where these readings begin. These are also the times of, you may be familiar with what are called the O antiphons. If you're not, take a liturgy course and follow that. I'm not gonna. All right. So anyway, these days here, they're the same, they're the right number, but they may be sneaking up. This is the latest things can be. This is what Advent would look like if Christmas were on a Sunday. Okay? For us, this year, this is the longest possible Advent we have this year coming up. The shortest possible Advent. Okay? Because Christmas is on a Monday. So like I said, we still have the 4 Sundays of Advent, but not 4 full weeks. Okay, so the 17th starts there. Okay. So, but you can still see even this year, we get a lot of Isaiah. Okay, and this year where it'll all be experts coming to Mass, it'll be much more familiar to you. Okay. Did it again. Okay. I want to look first of all at what are called the Emmanuel prophecies, because these play a key role in Advent. Okay? There are 2 very important passages. Isaiah 7, 10 through 14. And if you've got your Bible, just go ahead and take a look at that now. And you will see, we'll go, hello, old friend. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask for a sign from the Lord your God, that it be as deep as the netherworld or high as the sky. But Ahaz answered, I will not ask, I will not tempt the Lord. Then he said, Listen, O house of David, is it not enough for you to weary people? Must you also weary my God? Therefore the Lord himself will give you this sign. A virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel. Okay, look at, folks, verse 14. In any of your Bibles, do you have a word other than virgin? What does yours say?
It says the young woman.
Young woman, maid. Okay, all right. To be honest with you, that is a closer translation. Talk about that in just a second. Okay, the other passage, Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 6. And this is the one that we proclaim at midnight mass on Christmas. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon those who dwelt in the land of gloom, a light has shone. Blah, blah, blah. For a child is born to us, a son is given us. Upon his shoulder dominion rests. Okay, that's the passage that allowed Handel to have his career. All right. So looking at Isaiah 7, 10 through 14, what was going on at the time? Remember we said that the prophet dealt with events as they were happening. Okay. The Assyrians are threatening the entire region. They are in the process of, or they have just taken over the northern kingdom, Israel, but they are a threat to Judah as well. There's a time when Ahaz is king of Judah. Okay? And he's trying to negotiate an alliance with the Assyrians. Okay? Let's be friends so that you won't attack and destroy me. Isaiah comes to Ahaz and tells him not to worry. God has not forgotten the covenant with David. Okay, so David's descendants will continue to enjoy God's favor. Don't worry. Ahaz doesn't want to hear that. He's very committed to this alliance. Ahaz doesn't want a sign from or cooperation with God. He's much more committed to trying to cooperate with Assyria. Okay, so what we find in this passage, Ahaz's response to Isaiah, it sounds like it's piety, but it's really a very contemptuous response. It's really very sarcastic. And then Isaiah says, okay, here's the sign that God will give to all of Judah. So, again the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask for a sign from the Lord your God. Okay? Let me reassure you that I have not withdrawn my favor from the house of David. That it be as deep as the abode of the dead or high as the sky. But Ahaz answered, I will not ask. I will not tempt the Lord. It's really saying, I don't want to hear what God has to say. So, Isaiah says, listen, house of David, is it not enough that you weary human beings? Must you also weary my God? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The young woman, pregnant and about to bear a son, shall name him Emmanuel. Meaning, God is with us. Okay. it doesn't say, Isaiah doesn't say who the young woman is. He just simply says, a young woman who is about to bear a son will do so and will name him Emmanuel, which will remind us that God is with us. Emmanuel will grow to be the great king, the way that David was a great king. So in that way you are being reassured. Now, I went through all of that rigmarole at the beginning, reminding us that prophets were not about looking into the future, so that we don't operate under the assumption that what Isaiah was saying was he was having a vision of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. No, he wasn't. And so that's why when you look at the texts, the original text, the word that is used is young woman. And then when later translations came about, the authors used a different word that translated more as virgin, because they were trying to take this text and match it up to what Christians believe was the case. Okay, so in saying this, in making this point, I'm not denying that Mary was a virgin or that Christ was born of a virgin or anything like that. All I'm saying is Isaiah wasn't talking about Mary and Jesus. He was talking about trying to reassure the people that God had not forgotten them, that a Messiah, a deliverer, a great king would in fact be raised up, just as David was the great king, and David received the promise, the covenant with God. So it will be again. So what happened? Well, when the early church, when they were looking at the story of Jesus, the Gospels basically were in formation through the telling of the stories. They looked back to their history. These were Jewish Christians. They looked back to their history. They said, well, wait a minute. Look at this, where Isaiah said this. Well, that's what we believe about Jesus. Could Isaiah have been referring to that? Well, that makes a bit more sense. So now when we tell the story, to help get our point across, let's include that. And that gives a little more proof. That gives a little more credibility to it. Okay? Especially for people who come from a Jewish background. But the fact is, Isaiah is not predicting the future. Matthew uses Isaiah to back up, or to structure in some ways the telling of his story. All right. The second passage. And this oracle is to confirm that Emmanuel truly will be the Son of God. Okay, God with us. David was sometimes referred to as Son of God, not in the sense that he was divinity, but that he enjoyed God's special favor. the covenant. Just as David was remembered as the great king, Emmanuel will be celebrated as God's favor being with his people for generations to come. Okay? This is God making a promise. Don't read Jesus into it at this time. You can, as we look back now, we can read Jesus into it and say, well, we know that from our faith standpoint, this is exactly how it happened. It's believed that this song, this 1 through 6, was used at the coronation ceremony. So you look at the wording and this is amazing. This is wonderful. The king, man, he's on top. We're number one. This was used when there was a coronation, affirming again the house of David, the lineage. Okay, I hope I'm not talking over your heads on this, folks. It's okay. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon those who live in a land of gloom, a light has shone. You brought them abundant joy and great rejoicing. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at harvest, as they exult when dividing the spoils. For the yoke that burdened them, the pole on their shoulder, the rod of their taskmaster, you have smashed on the day of Midian. For every boot that tramped in battle, every cloak rolled in blood, will be burned as fuel for fire. Our suffering, our being pushed around, our insignificance is at an end. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us, upon his shoulder dominion rests. He's in charge. They name him Wonder Counselor, God, Hero, Father forever, Prince of Peace. His dominion is vast and forever peaceful. Upon David's throne and over his kingdom, which he confirms by judgment and justice, God confirms and sustains by judgment and justice both now and forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Because God has great love and commitment to the covenant, this is taking place. And so when you look at that wording, you can say, okay, yeah, when a new king was being crowned, I could see why they would use this wording, why they would use this song. Sure. So if Isaiah wasn't about predicting the future, how did he know that Jesus would fulfill all these prophecies? He didn't worry about that. He never, he wasn't about Jesus. As I said, if you remember that from the events in Jesus' life to the time that the Gospels were written was 40, 50, or 60 years. In the intervening time, the stories were being told orally from generation to generation. They didn't write things down. Okay? Those of you that wanted notes right away, so you could write everything down. No, oral tradition. Yeah. But as the stories, and we're talking about now after Jesus, okay, so the early Christian church, the early believers, as the stories were coming together and eventually being formed into the Gospels, there were several different sources that would kind of come together. That's why each Gospel is different. One of the sources that was used in Matthew's Gospel was a collection of all of the oracles or the prophecies of Isaiah that could be taken and applied to Jesus. And as I said, Matthew, which was written, the gospel was written for Christians who had come from a Jewish background, then having all of this from their faith, their old faith, but it's speaking to their new faith, that's going to help strengthen them. Okay? So that's why we say that prophets aren't about predicting the future. But it can be much easier to just assume that he was. And, Isaiah looked and saw that Jesus was going to be coming, and saw that Jesus would be born of a virgin, and saw that Jesus would suffer and die. And that's why Isaiah said what he did. La, 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 la. I don't want to hear anything else. And besides, to give any other explanation takes 3 weeks of lectures in front of, Well, all right. All right. So much for Advent. What about Lent? Yeah.
Well, a question. Going back to the oral history,
Okay.
50 or 60 years, I can tell Deacon Charlie a story. Only know when to tell it to his wife Joe. Yeah. Within 5 minutes, and it's probably not going to be the same story that I told Charlie.
Okay.
How
Yeah.
do we know that? I mean, what is that distortion between 50 and 60?
Okay. And this falls under the whole process of scriptural development, the different stages. What the church teaches is, and this wasn't necessarily individual telling the story, you to Charlie. This was more what a community of believers taught, the story that they all held in common, okay? But ultimately, what it comes down to is we believe that in the things that God wanted in the scriptures for the sake of our salvation, the Holy Spirit was guiding along the way to keep us not from errors in every single little thing. Okay, because I can do a whole class just on this with RCIA, but those who believe that every word in the Bible is true in every sense of the word, the stories of creation are exactly the way that it happened, they have a certain way of looking at truth. For us as Catholic Christians, in terms of our belief in the Bible, we don't look to the Bible for scientific truth. We don't look to the Bible so much for historical truth. We look to the Bible primarily for religious truth. And the religious truths that we find in the Gospels have to do with Jesus as the Son of God, born of a virgin. Okay, the things that we find in the Creed. Okay, but you look at even the Gospels, and it's not one story. You look at Christmas, the Christmas story, which we all know. But if you really take a look at it, you realize there are two different Christmas stories. Angels appearing to shepherds is in Luke's gospel. Angels appearing to Joseph and the Magi following the star is in Matthew's gospel. So they are two very, very different stories, and yet they both point to this is the Son of God, born of the Virgin, incarnate, who came, suffered, died, rose from the dead for our salvation. Okay, so it's a different way of looking at factualness, history, and please don't take this wrong, but it was a bad example. I mean, anytime you tell something to Charlie, you can Okay. Anybody else have a question that I can twist into a cheap shot? No. Yes. The same thing. Yeah, it's just another way to, right.
But if they have grace systems, grace to all these people in their own church, will they be the one that have to remember all this so they can tell?
Well, there were certain people that they were kind of tasked with being able to tell the story, and this goes back to the Old Testament. Okay, there were members of the tribe. You know, everybody was expected to know the story of the tribe, but there were certain members who had the express responsibility of, you must remember the story. You must make sure that it is being told properly and correctly. And that's the way of history for the Jews. The scriptures only, the Jewish scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, only began to be written down during the time of the exile. And the reason for that was they looked around and they said, whoa, we are in danger of losing our story and our storytellers. We need to find ways to make sure that we don't lose that. So that's when the writing down began. But you look in Judaism, when is, a boy, a young man, what takes place at the bar mitzvah? He has to tell the story of his people. And he is becoming a man by taking responsibility for that story. That's his responsibility to his people. Pardon?
So it was at that point where we have what we know of as scribes, and before the elders were basically responsible?
No. The scribes were just another name for religious authority, like Pharisees, like rabbis. They were teachers. They just had their own approach to it.
Is that more New Testament, or was it in this Jewish?
No. The ones that were members of the tribe of storytellers, they weren't necessarily called scribes. The scribes that we have in the New Testament that confronted Jesus, that's not no. Okay. All right, let's move forward. Sorry about having to cut things off. So, Lent. Let's take a quick look at what Lent looks like. Okay, as I said, fixed number of days. It always starts on Ash Wednesday. It always has these Sundays, including Palm Sunday, Holy Week, and then the Triduum, the 3 days, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Vigil. Okay, that's standard. That's a fixed number of days. And it will be until somebody decides that we need to have Easter on a day other than Sunday. And that ain't going to happen, kids. Okay, now, let's take a look at how much Isaiah we see during the season of Lent. You remember how much we saw during Advent? For a longer season, a lot less. Why doesn't the church, would you say, make more use of Isaiah during the season of Lent? Anybody have any thoughts?
The Savior's already come.
Well, okay, but we still have Old Testament readings here. We just don't use Isaiah as much. I think, I'm not absolutely sure this is the reason why, but in Lent, what do we focus on? We focus more on ourselves as individuals, keeping the law, okay, changing our hearts. Okay, that's more of an individual morality type of thing. Isaiah wasn't so much addressing himself to individuals as much as he was to the group. And Isaiah had more of that element of looking forward to the coming of Emmanuel, the Messiah, the great King. Okay, especially during second Isaiah, when they were in the exile. Okay, so there are just lots of other Old Testament, whether it's prophets, whether it's some of the historical books that get used during Lent. And the little bit that we do use Isaiah, it's, let us set things right. God says, I want justice as my fast. So on and so forth. However, in fact, Isaiah plays a very important part in Lent. Holy Week. Boom. Isaiah. Not on Holy Thursday. Isaiah. Okay. These are called the songs of the servant of God. You're very familiar with these, whether you realize it or not. Okay. The songs of the servant of God. Second Isaiah, 4 passages that make reference to the servant of the Lord. Scholars are uncertain as to who this servant is. Is it Isaiah himself? Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I had colored these so that they would stand out more. Is the servant meant to be referring to the people in general, the nation? Is it a king? Or is it just a literary construct that there isn't meant to be a real servant of the Lord, but we use a fictitious one to get my message across about how God will deal with us? Okay. What the songs, what the poems make clear is that the servant is a prophetic figure called to bear witness to God and to participate in God's mission. Okay, this is why I pass out notes to you so you can have this stuff that I pulled out of other people's notes. Okay, the servant is called to be light, and called not only to discipleship but also to leadership. The mission of the servant will entail pain, suffering, rejection, and being misunderstood. The servant's greatest hope is in and with God. Okay. So, first servant song, chapter 42. And this basically just establishes the servant's identity, being called by God. Okay? Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one with whom I am pleased, upon whom I have put my spirit. He shall bring forth justice to the nations, not crying out, not shouting, not making his voice heard in the street. Okay? I, the Lord, have called you for the victory of justice. I have grasped you by the hand. I formed you and set you as a covenant to the people, a light for the nations. Okay, so here is my servant. Isn't that nice? But we're familiar with it. Then we go to Isaiah 49, 1 through 6. Okay, and again, it continues the theme of the servant's mission. God's salvation is meant for all. Hear me, O coastlands. Listen, O distant peoples. The Lord called me from birth, from my mother's womb. He gave me my name. By the way, parallelism there? Yeah, you spotted that right away. He made of me a sharp-edged sword and concealed me in the shadow of his arm. You are my servant, he said to me, Israel, through whom I show my glory. It is too little, he says, for you to be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob and restore the survivors of Israel. I will make you a light to the nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. Okay. The first song, we hear that on Monday of Holy Week, as we are heading into the events of Christ's suffering, death, and resurrection. Okay. It's setting the tone a bit in the sense of, okay, this is moving towards this climax for a very special reason in God's plan. And the church was more and more able to see in the servant the person of Jesus. Okay? Because the early church did that, fine. That's to reinforce our Christian understanding. That doesn't mean that Isaiah saw it that way. Okay, I hope we're clear on that by now. All right, third one, chapter 50, verses 4 through 9. And this one is proclaimed at Mass on Wednesday of Holy Week, but also on Palm Sunday, 3 days before. The Lord God has given me a well-trained tongue, that I might know how to speak to the weary a word that will rouse them. Morning after morning he opens my ear that I may hear, and I have not rebelled, have not turned back. I gave my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who plucked my beard. My face I did not shield from buffets and spitting. The Lord God is my help, therefore I am not disgraced. I have set my face like flint, knowing that I shall not be put to shame. Okay, but suffering begins to come in there. And then finally, on Good Friday. The first reading is a rather long one. Chapter 52, starting with verse 13, and going all the way 53, verse 12, which is basically all of chapter 53. And you look at that, and there are so many passages that we are familiar with in terms of thinking of Jesus, thinking of what he suffered, what we are told in the Gospels. It was, my servant shall prosper. He was spurned and avoided by men, a man of suffering, accustomed to infirmity. Yet it was our infirmities that he bore, our sufferings that he endured. We thought of him as stricken, as one smitten by God, as afflicted. But he was pierced for our offenses, crushed for our sins. Upon him was the chastisement that makes us whole. By his stripes we were healed. Okay, this is called the Song of the Suffering Servant. At the very end there we say, therefore, I will, because of his affliction, he shall see the light in fullness of days. Because he surrendered himself to death and was counted among the wicked, and he shall take away the sins of many and win pardon for their offenses. Therefore, I will give him his portion among the great, and he shall divide the spoils with the mighty. Okay? So now please remember, when we get to Holy Week this year, and you hear these proclaimed as the first reading, let them really speak to you even more, that they'll have a bit of an additional meaning for you now. Okay. This we've kind of said already, but the early Christians, in coming to grips with Christ's identity, his self-understanding, and his paschal mystery, found in the servant songs a way to interpret the events of Jesus and give new insight and new meaning. The events in the Gospels occurred 40 plus years before they were written down. The story was being remembered and retold for generations. That would involve interpretation, insights, and the faith of the believers, plus the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So, was Isaiah looking into the future and predicting all that Jesus would experience? Probably not. Have the gospel authors, by incorporating these poems, these oracles, these prophecies into their telling of the Jesus story, helped us as Christians to deepen our faith? Most definitely. This is church, so I didn't want to put hell yes on it. Same thing. Okay, any questions?
How long do they have this during Lent and Easter? Is that in one council of the church, or is that way back?
That this was all brought about? I don't know exactly how the lectionary, which is the collection of the readings in the order that they're in, I don't know exactly how or when that got put together. As is, I think, the case, as in most practices of the church, it was something that they were pretty much doing before it became officially sanctioned. But I don't know. I just know that in my 36 years I've had the lectionary and we've had it before that. So that's good enough for me, and I'm going to be ignorant of it. No.
I guess it must have been like one of those somebody was reading and you read it. We found it. This is what it is.
Could very well be, but yeah. And like things have changed over the centuries, like with the reforms of the Second Vatican Council, the liturgies for Holy Week, especially for the Triduum, take on a deeper meaning or significance, or it really focuses on the essentials as opposed to all kinds of other stuff that we used to have. So things evolve, they develop, but it's really neat the way, in our 2,000-year history, the church fathers had the vision or the insight to say, okay, if we group these readings this way, it will help reinforce the message or what this season is meant to be about. Okay, and that could have, very easily been in the 5th or the 6th century, some of the early fathers of the church. Okay, but I don't know for sure.
You were talking earlier about he's saying that God has given him a well-trained tongue to raise
Okay.
his
Yeah, the
grace.
third-
What does a well-trained tongue mean in that time?
It just, again, in that case, it was the servant, the prophet, whoever it was, saying that they had been commissioned by God. And God wants me to say certain things. And so I'm qualified to do so because God is helping me to do it. Okay. But yeah, this just kind of tells you about the hell that is my life. But for a while there, I would have nightmares that I had to do that first reading. And I get up and start, the Lord has given me a left-hand tongue. Ow! Do you have a question? Oh. Yeah.
So we were talking about kind of the first portion of Isaiah, well actually all three portions of Isaiah being utilized in Advent, and then more the second portion of Isaiah because they were in exile at that time and they were suffering as being utilized during Lent.
No, it's. I was saying that more just in the sense of Isaiah has more of an anticipation feel to it, and that's why just more of Isaiah in general is used in Advent as opposed to Lent. So it's not. I didn't mean to try and get across some kind of an understanding that okay, second Isaiah would be more useful here or anything like that. I just was doing the comparison in terms of Isaiah content.
Well, you did a good job because to figure it out for us.
Oh.
Remember.
Well, okay, thank you. As we say,